Hi, my name is Kathy Higgins Patisteas, Brewer High School, class of 1973. I grew up in Eddington, where the only sports we had at Eddington Elementary School was softball for like 7th and 8th graders. And then my 8th grade year, we had a new middle school and we had a gym, so we got to play basketball. So at that time, basketball was 6-on-6, and only two people played the whole court. So I just remember it being boring to play, let alone I can't imagine watching. But I believe it was either my junior or senior year at Brewer, it finally changed to 5 people. And I just remember being so excited because we could run, and I loved to run. In June of 1973, which was my senior year, I wrote a letter to the Bangor Daily News that got printed in response to an article that they printed in May of that year about the lack of track equipment at Brewer. And I just remember that I vividly remember the picture of Coach McDougall standing in front of either the high jump pit or the pole vault pit, which was just these big bags of old foam. With this dejected look on his face, saying, "Oh, poor us. We only get $2,000 a year for track, and Brewer doesn't have a track, but they have this really successful boys track program." And it just really bothered me because the girls' track team had nothing. We barely had a coach because the girls' gym teacher, Phyllis Worthley at the time, was coaching softball, so she couldn't be coaching track at the same time. We did have some volunteers at different years that helped out, but basically we were on our own. We didn't have any equipment of our own. We had to wait for the boys to finish because, their hurdles were different height than ours and their high jump was different height than ours. So we had to wait till they finished and then we could use the equipment. But because the coach was so pulled in different directions, we only had about 3 track meets a year. And I remember one, my senior year in Ellsworth. So we all get on the bus and we, go down to Ellsworth. And high jump was one of my favorite, next to hurdles, events. And we got there and they had no pit at all, like no landing cushion at all, except sawdust. Because the boys had an away meet and they took the foam pits with them. So the choice was to either jump into sawdust or, scrap the event. Well, of course, we weren't going to do that. Unfortunately, at this time, so 1973, most people were still doing the roll kind of high jump where you land on your feet. It wasn't a problem for that. I, however, did the flop backwards. So every time I jumped, I land flat on my back on basically the ground. Ended up hurting my back, had to sit in a whirlpool for a while. My mother was furious that, the adults let us do that. But that was what we did. Back to my letter. I remember when it got printed, I was so excited. And I had Mrs. Worthley, check my facts, make sure it was accurate. And I was called into the principal's office, which for me was a big deal. And I remember being scared to death. And I remember sitting there and him telling me he didn't think it was proper for a student to criticize the school. I don't think I pointed out to him that I wasn't a student because I was just petrified. And I remember leaving there crying, going down to Mrs. Worthley's office and telling her, but I never said I was a student. So she was very supportive. But nothing changed much. The one thing that did change between junior and senior years, we'd always had the Olympic Sports Day. And my senior year, we had an actual State Principals Association state meet, which was a small change, really, but it was a big deal to us. The other thing I mentioned in my letters were uniforms, because I had a brother a year older and a brother a year younger who were running track. And, the boys had uniforms and they had all this equipment, warm-ups, some of them. We had nothing. I remember freshman year, I've got pictures of these old uniforms. And then I don't know, we just decided we weren't going to wear them or what, but then we just wore our gym clothes, which, you had to buy your pair of shorts and a t-shirt, and that's what we wore because it was the only thing we had. So the changes just in my career, sports career, is, we went from no sports and then to high school where, things started to change. And then I remember in 1973, in the fall, I went off to college in Boston at Northeastern University, and they had no women's track team at all. And I was so disappointed. And I would go over in the evenings and, run around the field house and set up the hurdles and run them. But it left a big hole in my life, and I really regret that. The other thing I've noticed, looking back, is the development of female student athletes or scholar athletes. When I was at Brewer, I was in college prep classes, but none of the other girls in my classes played sports. None of the people I played sports with were in my classes. So it was like two separate groups. All the boys were in my classes, were all into sports, track, basketball, football, everything, but none of the girls. And it's just been kind of eye-opening to see like the next generation and how many girls are now students and athletes. And that's been, I think, a real good change, positive change.